Benjamin Franklin wrote often for like the Gazette, different papers, and he went under a couple of different aliases. One of them was Silence Dogood. This was 1722. It's too bad none of the Supreme Court judges seem to understand our founders very well. They really should go on archives.gov, and then they could really understand and make the proper judgments, especially when it comes to free speech. Because this will tell you exactly why they did what they did. Without this, so this is Ben Franklin that's writing this. Without freedom of thought, there can be no such thing as wisdom, and no such thing as public liberty without freedom of speech, which is the right of every man as far as by it he does not hurt or control the right of another. And this is the only check it ought to suffer, and the only bounds it ought to know. This sacred privilege is so essential to free government that the security of property and freedom of speech always go together. The freedom of property and the freedom of speech always go together. Kind of makes you wonder, what's the Supreme Court up to, huh? And in those wretched countries where a man cannot call his tongue his own, he can scarce call anything else his own. Whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech, a terrible thing to public traitors. This secret was so well known to the court of King Charles I that his wicked ministry procured a proclamation to forbid the people to talk of parliaments which those traitors had laid aside. To assert an undoubted right of the subject and defend his majesty's legal prerogative was called disaffection and punished by sedition. People were forbid to talk of religion in their families, for the priests had combined with the ministers to cook up tyranny and suppress truth and the law, while the late King James, when the Duke of York went avowedly to Massachusetts, men were fined, imprisoned, and undone for saying he was a papist, and that King Charles II might live more securely as a papist. There was an act of parliament made declaring it treason to say that he was one. Quote, that men ought to speak well of their governments is true, while their governors deserve to be well spoken of. But to do public mischief without hearing of it, only the prerogative and felicity of tyranny, a free people will be showing that they are so by their freedom of speech. The administrations of government is nothing else but the attendance of the trustees of the people upon the interest and affairs of the people, and it is the part and business of the people for whose sake alone all public matters are or ought to be transacted, to see whether they be well or ill transacted. So it is the interest and ought to be the ambition of all honest magistrates to have their deeds openly examined and publicly scanned. Only the wicked governors of men dread what is said of them. Freedom of speech is ever the symptom as well as the effect of a good government. In old Rome, all was left to the judgment and pleasure of the people, who examined the public proceedings with such discretion and censured those who administered them with equity and mildness, that in the space of 300 years not 5 public ministers suffered unjustly. Indeed, whenever the commons proceeded to violence, the great ones had been the aggressors. Guilt only dreads liberty of speech. Guilt only dreads liberty of speech, which drags it out of its lurking holes and exposes its deformity and horror to daylight. liberty of speech, they lost my place. Their administration, the more it was examined, the more it brightened and gained by inquiry. In particular, was accused upon some slight grounds of affecting the diadem. He who was the first minister of Rome does not accuse the people for examining his conduct, but approved his innocence in a speech to them, and gave such sanctification to them, and gained such popularity to himself, that they gave him a new name. But things afterwards took another turn. In Rome, with the loss of its liberties, lost all its freedom of speech. Then men's words began to be feared and watched, and then first began the poisonous race of informers, banished indeed under the righteous administration of Titus, Nerva, Trajan, and Aurelius, but encouraged and enriched under the vile ministry. I can't even pronounce this name. It's so. The best princes have ever have encouraged and promoted freedom of speech. They know that upright measures would defend themselves, and that all upright men would defend them. I doubt not, but old Spencer and his son, who were the chief ministers and betrayers of Edward II, would have been very glad to have stopped the mouths of all honest men in England. They dreaded to be called traitors because they were traitors. And I dare say Queen Elizabeth Walsingham, who deserved no reproaches, feared none. Misrepresentation of public measures easily overthrown by representing public measures truly. When they are honest, they ought to be publicly known, that they may be publicly commended. But if they are pernicious or unscrupulous, they ought to be quickly exposed in order to be publicly detested. So it's really too bad that the Supreme Court has failed. Clearly, it's a court that needs to be eliminated. You know what? What really needs to happen is I'm really pissed off at the media. You know, while they want to send you down this wild goose chase, you got to fear nuclear weapons and Russia. No, Russia could have nuked us a long time ago. I'm not at the least afraid of that bullshit. I think Russia knows, I think that they at least have competent men there that know that that's an avenue that leads all of us to a horrible end. But the media wants to scare you. And I'm going to tell you something. What they should really, if they were honest men, if Glenn Beck was honest, if any of these people that have these big shows and big platforms, that X allows, that TikTok allows, lets all of them, right? They can say whatever they want. But me and everybody else, the regular everyday people, the people Benjamin Franklin was talking about, no, we can't have a voice, can we? Shame on all of them.